All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to draw a cylinder. And I have my tools here. I have two types of erasers, a variety of pencils, as well as my ruler. And that's all you need for the cylinder drawing here today. What I'm going to do is start off with some notes. So I'm going to put these notes up here at the top. For a cylinder, and by the way, I am going to go fairly quickly. If you have any questions at any point, you can pause the video, rewind, watch any part over and over again, however you need to. We'll start off with some notes for the cylinder, so I'm going to put those over here. For the cylinder, first thing you want to keep in mind at the top of the cylinder is a well-formed ellipse. Now the ellipse is referring to the top of the cylinder, and I'll show you that real quick. That's this part right here. It is a circle. Of course, we know it's a circle, but when we view that circle from the side in perspective, it's called an ellipse. That ellipse should have no points on it, okay? The corners are not points, they are rounded, okay? And it should be a mirror image of itself. And that means both up and down and left and right, okay? It's symmetrical both ways, left and right and up and down. All right, the next bit of notes, both sides of the cylinder are straight. Straight sides on the left and the right. So that's the first thing we're going to do is measure those out. Next, curve at the bottom of the cylinder matches the bottom of the ellipse. So this curve right here should match this curve right here. All right, next bit of notes, there are rounded corners. And I'm speaking about the bottom two corners. They shouldn't just be crisp corners. They should have a bit of a rounded edge to them. And the final bit of notes, we are very much concerned with a smooth value gradation here. That smooth value gradation is going to allow us to see that the side of the cylinder is round, okay? Now the first thing you want to do with the cylinder is you want to measure out the left and right side. So I'm going to place my ruler down on the page here. I'm drawing on a single sheet of 9 by 12 paper. You might be drawing on a different size paper, so your measurements might not be the same as mine. But what I'm going to do is just do a general measurements here and shape so that you guys can see the cylinder clearly. So I'm starting just measuring in 2 inches from the left side of the page. That's going to be the left side of the top of my cylinder, and I'm just going to go over 3 inches. I think that's a good size for my cylinder. And so I put a mark at 2 and at 5. Okay, and now I'm going to move down to where I want the base of my cylinder to be. Not an exact measurement, but I think that should be a nice size cylinder there. And I'm going to start doing the same thing, a mark at 2 and a mark at 5. And now I can connect those for the sides of my cylinders, and I'll know that they are straight, and I will also know that they are parallel. Okay. Remember, in these beginning stages when you're drawing a form like this, you don't want to do heavy outlines. I am using a 4B, and that's just so that you can see it better, but I do have my kneaded eraser here in case it does get too dark, because eventually this will need to be lightened up. Okay, so you can see that kneaded eraser just lifts the graphite right off the paper. The ellipse shape is something that will probably take a try or two. And you'll see, I probably won't be able to get it on the first try. But a couple things that you just want to stay away from. You don't want to have any corners. Here's the do not section down here. Okay, you don't want to have corners on each side, like a football or like an I shape. So these should not be meeting at a corner. There should be rounded edges on that. Another thing that you want to stay away from is having just one of those. Like sometimes people will start the ellipse and then they'll finish it where they started and it looks like a teardrop shape. These are two things you want to avoid. One last thing I think that people do a lot of is they'll draw almost like a hot dog shape where the edges will be round and then it's a flat bottom, edge is round, and a flat top. So it looks like a hot dog or a Twinkie. You want to avoid that as well. The ellipse shape is kind of tough. It is a circle, but it's that circle that's viewed on the side in perspective, so it changes the shape slightly. It's a lot like an oval. So what we're going to do is attempt to do the ellipse here and have the edges be meeting in the corners. Remember, that is a mirror image, so it should be symmetrical both up and down and left and right. Not too bad. That first initial line I knew was a little low. And it does look a little sketchy right now, but that's okay. I'm just going to clean it up slightly. But that wasn't too bad. All right. And then you can do a little check. Is it symmetrical? You can draw almost like a crosshair through the ellipse. Just to see if it's the same as it is, top to bottom and left and right. And just looking at mine, I'm seeing a little bit of a dent here, so I'm going to fix that up. There we go. Looking pretty good. I'll keep it like that for now. And now the bottom of the cylinder will match that curve right there, so we're going to attempt to make that curve match the bottom of the ellipse there. Might take a try or two. Don't be too concerned if you don't get it on the first try. Again, sometimes I'll do a sketchy line like that and then I'll find the one that fits best and make it nice and clean. It's a little hard to do. But we're going to probably cover some of that up with shading. So I think that's fine for now. All right, moving along. We want to probably set up the shadow right now before we do any other shading. And that will be similar to the cube. We're going to start at the widest part of the cylinder. With our light source now, probably keep that the same from the left side, and our shadow going to go out to the right. I'm going to start at the widest point of the cylinder, and since it's up, our light source is like in the top left, I'm going to have my light source come out a little bit to the front, so I have a slight diagonal tilt here, and I imagine that the widest part of the cylinder would be close to the middle. With our light source being slightly above that, I'm going to probably be starting slightly in over here. A nice smooth line that comes out from the widest point of the cylinder, a slight diagonal downward tilt, and I'm going to create the front of the shadow right there. On the back of the shadow, if we were going to be doing that, we would have to imagine where the widest point of the cylinder was on the back side. So if you need to, you can draw this line. Of course, draw it lightly because you'll have to erase it. And we would be starting the cylinder from the widest part over there. Now it should be parallel to the line that you've already created, so just watch out for that. I'm going to slide my ruler up so I try to maintain that parallel line there, and I'm going to be starting the shadow from what's basically the opposite side there. One thing to note is that the shadow will contain that point of the corner of the cylinder there. So I am taking my line and making it parallel to that first shadow line, and that should be just fine, just like that. Okay? Then, moving on, We are allowed to shade now. We can get started with that. I'm going to erase this preliminary guideline that was inside the sphere, cylinder. And we're ready to shade. Now, with our light source being on the left side, we're going to create the darkest side of the cylinder, which is right here. This side will be darkest, and it will fade as it goes across to the left. That value gradation, once we add that, will give you the impression that your cylinder is round. Okay, my right side is going to be darkest. I'm using a 6B pencil there. And one thing I like to do a lot as I am shading is I'll rotate the paper. I also like to use the side of the pencil. This somewhat creates more of a surface area where the pencil is touching the paper, so it tends to avoid those scratchy lines that you might find when you shade. If you're using the point of the pencil, it's a very small surface area of the pencil tip that is touching the paper, so sometimes that gives you a little bit more of that liney, sort of scratchy feel to your shading. You want to avoid that. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to do a little bit of cross-hatching as well. You guys are familiar with that. Cross-hatching will help you sort of negate some of the scratchiness that might happen in your drawing. I'm going to switch it over to a 4B pencil. I'm going to combine that and overlap some of the areas that I did with my 6B pencil. Now that 6B pencil came out pretty far. I don't think that our shading is going to go all the way across. I think that it should end approximately right here. But again, I'm going to keep that line sort of just imaginary. I don't want to really have another line in there. So I'm bringing out the 4B pencil, pressing very lightly. It is still leaving a dark mark because it is a dark pencil. And I'm going to quickly switch over to a regular pencil. Mechanical pencil here is an HB pencil. I'm bringing that out as well, overlapping some of the sections I've already done. That'll help blend the look of the pencils together. And cross-hatching over some of the other stuff I've already done as well. Just try to soften that up also as we go along. Again, that cross-hatching might not seem like it's super effective for making soft shading, but what it does is it confuses the viewer basically on what direction your hand was going, and we don't want to have that sort of scratchy look. So if we have multiple directions for the scratches, it tends to confuse the viewer as to which direction your hand was going and make it a little softer. Switching over to the 4H pencil. It's a very light pencil. It's a very hard lead, so it doesn't leave a very dark line. And I'm already pressing very lightly, and this will allow me to fade out to nothing. Again, using more of the side of the pencil as well, so I avoid the scratchiness. So as you can see, not a single point was I finger smearing in this drawing. My fingers are clean. You can do this without finger smearing. Okay, pretty happy with that. I'm going to continue now shading on the interior of the ellipse, and what that's going to do is it's going to give the appearance that this cylinder is open and is hollow. So I'm starting with some dark shading on the left side, but I want to note one thing real quick, is that at a certain point, these outlines, you want them to disappear. In fact, the top right corner is going to be nearly invisible. And I'm going to use my other eraser for the left side because I initially made that line kind of dark, but I want that side to disappear as well. Outlines are really not good for your drawing. They may help you sort of see things clearly, or kind of crisp up the edges of items, but they're really not helpful as far as making it look three-dimensional. It actually does the opposite. It makes it look flat. So I'm using my 6B pencil here in the corner, starting very dark, and then I'm going to fade quickly. switch over to my, I'll switch over to my regular pencil. And another interesting factor is going to come into play here, and that is the lost edge that will develop. You'll know from the notes that you took back when we talked about line that lost edge is something where you have two areas that are same or similar value, and the line between them tends to disappear. So what you want to aim for in the ellipse shading here is to have a lost edge right about here, about midway on the cylinder, so that you have, again, you're aiming to eliminate the outlines. So when we get across here in the shading, there's going to be a section where the values are similar or the same, and that edge between them becomes lost, and that's a good thing. You want to avoid outlines, and having a lost edge is a good thing in this drawing. Okay, lighten up some of that shading because it wasn't a little dark over there. And we are basically good with the shading on the cylinder itself. Now we're ready to do the shading on the shadow. Now, just like the cube, the shading on the shadow will start darkest immediately next to the form, and that part is going to be basically the only part in the drawing that is 100%. If we're talking about percentage dark, 100% being pure black, and then 0% being pure white. So I have some pretty intense shading going on immediately next to the cylinder, and that 6B is going to fade out quickly. So I'm going to start pressing very lightly, switch to my to a 4B pencil, just to get a little bit of that 6B faded out. And then I'm going to switch over to my regular HB mechanical pencil. And I'm also going to hit the shadow outlines with my kneaded eraser so I can lighten those up. You really absolutely do not want to have your shadow be outlined. Even though your shadow is flat, you don't want to have an outline on it. Pulling out that regular HB pencil now. And then switching to my 4H pencil to finish off the shadow out here. Just making it very light by the end. And you can fade to nothing, basically. The pressure sensitivity of the pencils really does come into play here, where you are pressing so lightly that you're barely making a mark, and then fading out to nothing. All right, that looks pretty good. The only thing left to do is the atmosphere, the little bit of value shift on the outside. We definitely want to eliminate all outlines. So what do we do when the white side meets the white on the background? We need to give it a little atmosphere on the outside, just a little bit. So I'm using my 4H pencil again, and I'm just lightly grazing the page outside of the cylinder. And what that's doing is it's giving it a little bit of atmosphere, a little bit of value difference to establish that white edge, so that we can do that with value and not line. Remember, value differences, the difference between this and this is being a very light shade, is enough. Value differences are enough. You do not need line to create the edge. So the shift of value here is enough to establish the edge of the cylinder. I'm going to do in the top right corner as well. And if there was any area of this drawing that you could do some finger smearing, this would be the only opportunity that you would have to do that. Again, you don't need the finger smearing on the cylinder itself, as you could see, or the shadow, but you may use finger smearing just for the atmosphere outside, give that a soft appearance, and that's the only place you would do that. Last step would be to just clean up the very edge, making sure that's nice and clean white, and the top corner as well. we go. There we go. That's how you draw a cylinder.